Bueno, ahí estamos. Bueno, buenas tardes a todos los que están del otro lado de la pantalla. Hoy tenemos una sesión muy especial mientras se sigue sumando gente. Hoy tenemos con nosotros en la cátedra del Reino Unido, tenemos la visita de James McKeigue. James comenzó su carrera como trabajando para América Latina en la señal ITV, escribiendo en diarios de habla inglesa. Después regresó al Reino Unido y trabajó para Forbes durante mucho tiempo, se especializó y cubrió diversas revistas, en particular una revista sobre temas de energía conocida como Oil and Gas Investor, y trabajó como asesor para Barclays, Aberdeen Asset Management y para el Daily Telegraph. A partir del año 2013, James nos empezó a dirigir y es el editor para la revista LATAM Investor, que es la única revista especializada en temas financieros y de inversión en América Latina. James, I'm going to switch now to English. Thank you for visiting us today. It is a great pleasure to have you here to talk about investment in Argentina, investment opportunity. How are you looking through the exceptional condition that Argentina is facing in this brave new war, we can already say, in economic conditions? But before that, I would like to thank Ambassador Carlos Sersale, which is another well-known member of the academic community here at the UCEMA. He is one of the advisors of the Big Chamber in Argentina. Thank you, Ambassador, for being here and to introduce our guest for today's lecture. Thank you, Carlos, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you for your kind introduction. And well, thanks to SEM and the Cátedra, UK Cátedra, for organizing these talks. And it's also to the Brit Champs to be co-chairing this event. And also, I take the advantage to say hi to Daniel Alvarez, that is in London, is the CEO of the British Argentinian Chamber based in London. So, hola, Daniel. Well, it's and a special thanks to James McKeigue, because let me say that James and Latin Business provide a unique and key support to promoting business opportunities for both countries. And let me add that besides to our history and potential of the relation, his research, interviews, monthly magazines, and special reports are the only one that permanently promote business between the two countries in United Kingdom. So thanks for that, James. Very useful. Therefore, well, it's an honor for me to share this talk with him. And I'm sure that in his talk, he will focus on the superb report he recently published about investing in Argentina. Very recently, he was visiting our country not a long time ago. And it has interesting interviews and really is a very good identification of sectors for potential investments and investors too. Also, let me thanks to James, because when I was recently appointed ambassador to UK, that was in December 2015, and accredited here in January 2016, he was the first one who came to me to do an interview about the potential of the relationship. So really, and during my tenure there, that was in London, that was during 4 years, he really was assisting us in all the commercial and investment activities that we did at the embassy. Well, now going to my intention. My intention is to focus at the instruments, mainly bilateral ones, to promote business in Argentina or UK business in Argentina. Obviously, I want to mention that we collaborate at multilateral level with UK in a number of areas that also facilitate cooperation between the two countries. But my focus will be in bilateral. Based on my experience and privilege that I have had been ambassador to UK, allow me to present a few issues that may contribute to promote trade and investments, at least from our side, from the Argentinian one. I will not mention the macroeconomic issues. Those are quite obvious, and you are experts in these issues, and you know that. And macroeconomic issues relate to everything. So, but I am really will focus in what we need to do to promote mainly intensive capital investments to Argentina or more as a micro level. So, and these obstacles obviously are domestic and international for any type of private investments and to international trade. I personally consider Brexit as an opportunity for Argentina. Based on a structural analysis of our both economies and with the UK approach to global Britain and the importance of its private financial capital market operating in the City of London, we consider for Argentina an opportunity really that it's the new government, whoever is going to be next December, need to take seriously UK as a potential investor. It's the potential is there, and the complementarity of both economies are there, and the instruments also are there. So something that I hope that it's the new government will really look much more carefully into that, and will continue to do things that were done some time ago. Well, obviously, trade facilitation will be a priority for the new government, and the idea of negotiating a free trade agreement with much countries or with regional organizations based on the complementarity of our economy through Mercosur will be a must. Obviously, with England too, with Great Britain too. The flows of items and services that will result of that free trade agreement will promote private investments in Argentina as a result of the trade of items and services that will identify. I will come back to this item at this point later, referring to the instrument that we have for that. It's basically, as a specialist, even it's I mean, in my experience of more than 40 years of foreign diplomat as a practitioner, it's one of the main lessons is you can do whatever you want, whatever you do, and you best identifying a lot of different opportunities for Argentina to improve economic growth, to sustainable development, to improve the working of our institutions. But when you are abroad and you do all of these, and obviously based on the rationale of the complementarity of countries in all the items, not only trade and investment, you realize that foreign policy begins at home. And it's and in that context, if Argentina is not solving its competitiveness and institutional transparency for doing international business at large scale, I don't mean specific investments, smaller one, but it's a large scale. Both concepts are, it's need to be look really very in detail in order to dismantle all the different bottlenecks that affects competitiveness and institutional transparency. And it's those are the obstacles to international business, and obviously affect the potential of business with UK investments. in my homework list to generate long-term confidence and juridical security, we should include among other variables, first, domestically, simplify laws and regulations that are obstacle to private investment, domestically, internationally. I'm not really only talking about internationally. And laws and regulations is not just on the fiscal system, but also on the labor system. So if not, makes very difficult to generate business. The other thing that Argentina needs to do really to be an active member of international trade and system is to incorporate the European Union environmental standards to all our production. That is something that is a ceiling that we need to reach, and that's why I consider the agreement with the European Union quite important in that regard, because that is what is going to allow to have trade with all the rest of the world. Obviously, we need to improve infrastructure and logistics, and this is an area open for international investment associated with Argentinian companies or just themselves. Internationally, what are the list of issues? Well, in my view, we need a general investment protection treaty with constitutional range to avoid that new laws can modify the bilateral ones. With UK, we have one investment protection agreement, but it's only used when there is a controversy to go to the international court, and it's or to international tribunals, but not really to what means to attract the investments. It's basically an insurance. So, but in Argentina, laws, international treaties can have, if the Congress decide, constitutional range, constitutional level. So no one law can modify that. And I think if you do, particularly in the sectors that James is going to talk about, mining and energy, that are intense capital investments, that they need a long-term stability in order to really make them work, you need really to be sure that it's no change of rules of the original engagement. So that is something that at some point the new Congress need to think. Maybe starting with the domestic law, and after that, domestic law with the law, and after that to go to a further level. Well, obviously, double taxation agreements. We have one with UK, that is good. Connectivity is another issue, not only with flights. That's until not long time ago we have a daily flight. It's almost by 3 companies. Now there is only one with connections, and one direct flight only 3 times a week, I think. But also connectivity between people and institutions, because that creates a general framework for generate business. Have more companies listed in the market stock exchange. That is something that we should do. And I don't know why they go to New York, because New York is more expensive than go to London. But I mean, there is also a change of culture to do there. When you have mainly in the mining and energy sector, or mainly in the mining sector, most of the companies are based in the London Stock Exchange. The other thing that will give us, I think, in my view, will give more credibility and set up the country to international standards is to start our accession process to the OECD, something that should be done as soon as we can. Let me do a comment why I look in all these bottlenecks or obstacles to economic growth and sustainable development. In Argentina, the model of import substitutions, and the motto was life by our own means, became exhausted 50 years ago. There is no discussion on that. So the international rules for trade and investment that today prevails are really participating in the global networks of added values for goods and services for the real insertion of Argentina in the world. And private investments will follow this pattern of these global networks if really that will be the approach in having a much more open country. And at the same time, the other advantage is that given the industrial structure of Argentina that basically is formed by small and medium companies and are the main employers in terms of percentage, it's that will create association between the big companies intervening investing in Argentina, and that will be the chance to them to be integrated in different levels to these big projects or intensive capital projects. And besides the chances that they will import in technologies, it's that, as was done during until the Second World War, more or less, from UK, it's will also help them to improve their competitivity and being able to export some inputs to be inserted in this global network of trade. It's today there are instruments that exist today for promote trading and investment between Argentina and UK. Not used, but identify quite a few. First, there is a blueprint for a free trade agreement between Argentina and UK. That is a result of 2 years of work dedicated to put together data that include thousands of 6-digit items according to the international nomenclature. And the work was presented in 2019 in London at one of the British missions. Besides, was distributed to private sector, to all our British counterparts. So that is there. We have also, it's and that is the report that James is going to present after. That is the identification of sectors for investment with the participation of private companies and senior offices from the federal and provincial governments. That we have been done between 2017 and 2019. That are mainly mining, energy, we talk about oil, gas, and renewable. It's agro-industry, tech, and the main ones, but there are also others. And it's and thanks also for Latin investors to promote these activities and the great work that the Argentinian British Chamber of Commerce and the British Argentinian Chamber of Commerce supporting this. Also, we need to revive and take up again the talks that we have with the City of London, with the Stock Exchange and the London Metal Exchange. So we have been consistent during a few years in order to promote association of companies and talks between private companies for these kind of things. There is one thing. UKEF assigned in 2007 2 billion British pounds for project investments. I don't know how much they have been used, not much. If there is something have been used, it's but that money was assigned in 2017. Besides, we have an excellent work carried by the British Cham and the UK Embassy in Buenos Aires, including the visits of individual companies visiting UK and vice versa. We developed also public-private partnership collaboration between the treasuries. That is another instrument that should be also looked and redefine where the mistakes, rethink the mistakes if there have been mistakes in the implementation, but that is an instrument that has been a big collaboration from the UK Treasury to Argentina to develop that kind of mechanism. Something that people usually they don't associate with economics, that is the science and technology agreements aim to relate research with private investments. We have a very good experience in the pharmacy sector with UK companies that the result was as a research project done in Argentina that promote Glaxo investments in Argentina and in Brazil, and also others in the phytosanitary sector that also help to eliminate trade obstacles. If you want to justify that from the political point of view, we have memo of understanding most in political for one side and commercial dialogues at governmental level. That is the way also to promote the relationship and to identify and to try to solve the problems that they have, at the same time promote the good analysis and potential investment, like you will hear from James after. We have parliamentary cooperation and formal dialogue. That is something that was very useful and contribute particularly in a system like the British one that is based on parliamentarian decisions. So basically, what I want to say, but just to finish with this presentation, I mean that basically what from the Argentinian side, we need to generate political trust to contribute to business opportunities. And certainly events like this one and the work of Latin Investor Magazine and James McKeigue are part of this endeavor, and today USEMA generally allows us to present it. Thank you very much, and now the floor to James.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Absolutely fascinating to hear your insight after serving us 4 years as Argentina's ambassador to the UK. And I'm especially grateful for the kind words you said about me and about Latam Investor. Okay, look, so as the ambassador mentioned, I was in Argentina recently. So as already been said, my name is James McKeigue. I produce Latam Investor. I was in Argentina in March, and I spent 3 fascinating weeks in Argentina in March because we produced a report for a magazine about the Argentine economy. So what I'd like to do today, ladies and gentlemen, this is quite an informal presentation. I haven't prepared PowerPoints or slides. Instead, what I want to do is talk you through my time in Argentina, talk you through the report that we produced. And we're looking at this from an international perspective. So there's lots of stuff that as an outsider, I will not understand as well as you. I'm not going to get caught up talking about Argentine politics. Argentine politics are a mystery to me. I'm not going to pretend that I understand Argentine politics. But I do think it's interesting because my readers are international investors. So they're UK investors, but also American investors, European investors. And I think the perspective that we have, I'm not saying that we're necessarily right about everything, but the perspective that we have is a perspective that international investors have when they look at Argentina. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen, and at moments I'm going to show you parts of the report. At the moments I'm going to flick back to the camera so you can see my beautiful face as I'm speaking. And I mean, in essence, there's probably 4 main sectors that we identified when we went to Argentina. Possibly 5. The 4 obvious ones are energy, mining, agribusiness, and technology. And they're pretty obvious. If you look at Argentina's economy, you wouldn't have to be a genius to come up with those 4 sectors. And then we delved into some other areas. We thought finance looked quite interesting as well. So first of all, I'm going to hop between sharing my screen and not sharing my screen. Hopefully this works smoothly. So there you have it. So what you're looking at now is a digital version of our magazine, and I mean, obviously, it looks more impressive when you've got the print version. But this was our front cover. So in our latest issue, in our 3rd quarter issue, Argentina was the front cover, and as you can see from the title there, will crisis bring opportunity? And I'm going to stop sharing there. Will crisis bring opportunity? Because there is a surreal quality about visiting Argentina at the moment and about writing about Argentina. And the surreal quality is the following. On one hand, you have an economy that's in crisis. You have an economy that's clearly going to implode. And I'm sorry if as an outsider, maybe sometimes we can be a bit too blasé about this. And I'm sure for many people on this call, you have to deal with the daily realities of living in an economy in crisis. But it's quite bizarre. It was a very bizarre experience for me writing this report because everyone I spoke to Argentina was pessimistic. Everybody from taxi drivers to CEOs thinks that the crisis is going to get worse. everybody every day had to find ways to get around the crisis. So on that hand, you're looking at an economy with terrible problems. But on the other hand, when you look a bit further afield, and that's what my investors do, when you look at, investors in mining projects probably look 10 years ahead or 15 years ahead, or energy projects probably look 5 or 7 years ahead. When you look a bit further afield, the inevitable conclusion is that Argentina in 2030 will be a wealthier place than it is today. So that's the first thing I wanted to get across, is that you've got this terrible sense of crisis, but if you're a long-term investor who's prepared to ride out the crisis, then there's clearly a lot of opportunities. So I think one of the first area I want to look at is the economy. And just to convey that sense of crisis. So I'm just going to go back to sharing my screen. 1 second. Okay, so if we look at the Argentine economy, so as I said, I don't want to talk about the elections. I've got no idea who's going to the elections, but a very interesting point that someone made to me is that they said, James, it almost doesn't matter who wins the election. It doesn't matter if you've got the most extreme Peronist or if you've got Milei. And the reason this person said to me it almost didn't matter, he said, the economic situation is unsustainable. So whoever comes to power is going to have to take radical action. It's impossible to carry things on as they are. So I just want to show you one article we did you've got to remember that we interviewed about 35 CEOs. We interviewed the governors of lots of different provinces. We interviewed government officials. We interviewed local investors and international investors. And there was just one article that I want to show you, which looks at here we go, Argentina's incredibly chaotic economy. And what we did here is, like, after speaking to different sectors, we got a sense of just how distorted the Argentine economy is. So you can see there, we've got the subheading, whoever wins the election will need to normalize the economy. So whether you want to or not, the Argentine economy has to become normalized. That is no doubt going to be a very painful process. And we just wanted to look at specific industries where we think the situation is not sustainable. So, for example, the insurance industry. We spoke to insurance companies who explained that, according to Argentine law, when you have an insurance contract, that has to be paid to a local entity. The local insurers, obviously, just like in any country in the world, the local insurers do not have all of the capacity to deal with that locally. So they go to the international reinsurance market. Now, of course, we have a British focus, and the British are very big on reinsurance. That's one of our strong areas. So traditionally, Argentine insurance companies are insuring everything from refineries to aeroplanes to bridges, and they're passing on some of that reinsurance risk to international companies, often based in the UK. At the moment, that's not happening. At the moment, the Argentine companies are collecting those premiums, but they're unable to pass them on to the international insurance company. The Argentine insurance company effectively has to invest that money and hope that one day, when it's called upon, it's got enough money to answer whatever reinsurance claims it will have. That's not sustainable. Will those contracts be renewed next year? Would you get to a situation where planes in Argentina aren't being insured? I mean, at the moment, it's working. Like so many things in the Argentine economy, somehow it's working. But in the long term, that's not sustainable. Any modern economy, and Argentina is a very modern, sophisticated economy, needs to have an international insurance and reinsurance industry. The other area we looked at was the housing market. And again, it's incredible for someone in the UK to look at their Argentine housing market and realize that, firstly, that property isn't priced in the local currency, it's all priced in dollars. But secondly, that you effectively don't have a mortgage market. So we spoke to Fabian Con, the CEO of Banco Galicia, Argentina's largest bank. And we were amazed that he said that even during the Macri years, so even during the boom of Mauricio Macri, when everybody was very optimistic, and I'm just going to highlight this here, Banco Galicia only issued 7,000 mortgages. This is the biggest bank in the country. It's got more than 2 million customers. And even in the best, most optimistic of times, they only issued 7,000 mortgages. So that is something, hopefully, that's not sustainable. If you introduce credit into the Argentine housing market, the results would be incredible. So that's something we wanted to highlight. Importing, and this is going to come up later on when we look at some of the big sectors like mining. But this is something that we really had to explain to our readers. how difficult it is for companies in the Argentine economy to get dollars, and then the effect that has on importers. So we came across companies, so for example, this example here is Taka Oil Tools, where effectively they've had to open up international subsidiaries. So they've got companies in Colombia and Mexico. And any time they have to buy a piece of equipment for Argentina, they buy that through their international subsidiary. What does that mean? It means that their Argentinian operation is making money. They're not able to withdraw that money. So effectively, their operations in Colombia or Mexico are having to make the investments on behalf of the Argentine operation. They're having to subsidize the Argentine operation. Again, that's something that's not sustainable. And all of that, of course, comes to capital controls. And I think the most, you have some. The most interesting thing that somebody said to me about the capital controls is when you create barriers for dollars to leave Argentina, what you're effectively doing is creating barriers for dollars to come into Argentina. So effectively, Argentina has created the situation where nobody wants to commit dollars. And this will come up later when we're looking at why some large mining projects are not happening. But you also get some interesting side effects. So Argentina is one of the top 15 users of cryptocurrency. And I even know from working in the country with different clients that we've got, when clients are trying to pay us from Argentina, they're very innovative when it comes to finding different online platforms that they can pay us from. And just one incredible kind of consequence that we wanted to highlight. So look, I think what I want to say here is Argentina is an incredibly complicated business environment. I don't think it's particularly efficient when you've got such a distorted business environment, because you have to spend more on lawyers and accountants, and you have to find these workarounds that may or may not be completely legal. However, there are opportunities there. So one of the most incredible things we heard was from Oldeval. So Oldeval, who you may have heard of, is a pipeline that carries all of the crude from Vaca Muerta. And they're currently doing this big project Duplicar, so they can export more oil from Vaca Muerta. And something they explained to us is that they are able to raise money at 0% interest. So they recently, I'm going to highlight it here, they recently issued a 3-year, $50 million bond at 0% interest. And the way they do that is that they raise the money in pesos at the official rate to the dollar. And they promise that in 3 years' time, they will repay the bond at the official rate to the dollar. So effectively, investors believe that the official rate to the dollar is going to change in 3 years' time. So they're happy to give Oldeval money at 0% interest. So I just wanted to highlight that, because something I realized is that when you interview business people in Argentina, you get lots of people complaining about the distorted economy, but actually, there are an awful lot of people who are profiting from it or finding opportunities from it. And there's probably a lot of vested interest to support that distorted economy. So whoever comes to power has to correct those types of issues. Of course, there'll be many more issues, but I just wanted to give you a sense of how that affects everything from people building oil pipelines to people insuring planes. Needless to say, whoever takes power has got an incredibly difficult job ahead of them. Right. This talk will get positive, I promise you. We're going to talk about opportunities. But before we do, I just want to talk about the economy and about the causes of the economy. So I'm not an economic expert. What we do is that we interview economic experts. So for our economy article, we spoke to Daniel Marks, who's the CEO of Quantum Finance, or Quantum Finanzas, and he used to be a minister in the government. We spoke to Guillermo Perez from GNP, and we spoke to Ramiro Glasquez from Bank Trust. And we're going to share the copy of this report with you after the talk, so you can read through it and look in depth. But some of the interesting things that they told us, basically everyone agreed, is Argentina's in crisis because it's been hit by the perfect storm of factors. So you have you've got inflation, you've got war in Ukraine, you had the drought, and you've got these factors that are causing a hard time for the Argentine economy. Some of those factors are clearly short-term one-off factors. So let's say, for example, the war in Ukraine was a problem because it increased energy prices and Argentina has to import a lot of energy. Well, luckily, as we all know, Argentina is soon going to become an exporter of energy. So let's say by 2025, Argentina, which I think last year imported $6 billion of energy, is actually going to be exporting. So that's going to have so that tells us that some of the crisis is short term. The same obviously applies to the drought as well. So that was apparently the worst drought, some people said, in 70 years. This year is an El Nino year. Traditionally, in El Nino years, Argentina has bumper harvest. So again, that's a short-term hit, a massive hit, but that's something that will be fixed. But much more worrying are the structural challenges. So as all three of the gentlemen that I just mentioned, as they all said, the structural challenge, the real problem is a fiscal deficit, is that you've got a big state model which spends more than it raises. The fiscal deficit is roughly 9% of GDP. And when you're a country that has a history of default, when you're a country that nobody wants to lend you money, it's difficult to finance a fiscal deficit of 9%. So that's something we wanted to tell our readers, is that you hear so much bad economic news coming out of Argentina. People talk about the inflation, people talk about the exchange rate, but what we really wanted to explain to them is that this all boils down to the fiscal deficit. If you stop the fiscal deficit, it's easier to stabilize the exchange rate, and it's easier to control inflation. But the trouble is the fiscal deficit is a structural problem. And if you look into that, so there were different solutions. So Guillermo Perez, who ultimately is a tax auditor, his solution was tax. So tax evasion in Argentina is 40%. In Europe, it's more like 20%. So his solution, like any good taxman, was that we need to get tax evasion down from 40% to 20%. Daniel Marx's solution was growth. So he raised the point that in the last 10 years, or since 2011, Argentina's growth, economic growth, has not increased per capita. So Argentina stagnated. And there's a couple of statistics here which I couldn't believe it. Of the last 40 years, 18 of them have been recessions in Argentina. Now, probably that isn't so surprising for you guys. You're probably thinking, yeah, James, we know that, we live here. But for an international audience, I mean, it was incredible. That was the only country with a worst record is Libya. I mean, I would never have imagined that. So in the last 40 years, 18 have been recessions. Since 2011, you haven't grown the GDP per capita. And obviously, you know, the number of people in poverty has gone up from maybe 3% 50 years ago to officially around 40% now. So the real challenge with the Argentine economy, it's not the drought, it's not the energy bills, because they're short-term factors that can be fixed. It is the fiscal slippage, it's the fiscal deficit. And again, this is coming back, whoever takes power, it doesn't matter what party they represent. It's got to the point now where that's simply not sustainable, and that has to be changed. And again, I'm not the expert. It's not me who's saying this. Daniel Marx, who's got this boutique financial consultancy, he said to me, in the last 6 months, they've started getting lots of calls from investment banks. The investment banks are trying to make investments before the elections. He explained to me, they're not betting on who's going to win. Nobody knows who's going to win. What they're betting on is that whoever the new government is, they're going to have to make these changes. So I thought that was interesting. This isn't coming from me. This is coming from the international investors who are ringing Daniel Marx to make those trades. Right, very, very negative. Apologies for being so negative about your beautiful country. On a personal note, I first went to Argentina in 2006. That's where I first got to know Latin America. I met my wife in Argentina in 2009. I returned in business trips in 2010, in 2016, in 2018, and 2023. So during that time, I've got to see the progression of Argentina over that time frame, over the last 17 years. Some things, from an economic point of view, have invariably got worse. So we all know that The Economist has its famous Big Mac index, and I have the slightly less famous UGI's index. When I first went to Argentina in 2006, I was teaching English as a second language. I wasn't earning lots of money. And I used to get the cheapest pizza in UGI's, which back then it was 6 pesos. And I remember it was 6 pesos because back then £1 was 6 pesos, and the cheapest pizza in UGI's was 6 pesos. When I was there 2 months ago, I popped my head into UGI's. Luckily now Latin investor budget has increased, so I can spend a bit more than 6 pesos. But the cheapest pizza in UGI's is now about 1,000 pesos. And that was 2 months ago. It's probably even more now. So, but not everything is negative. Some of the stuff, when I was there in 2010, we used to talk about Vaca Muerta. I was working for Oil and Gas Investor. And it's incredible. In the last decade, the only country outside North America that has managed to repeat the US shale revolution at a large scale is Argentina. That's actually an incredible technological achievement. Like, look, Eastern Europe has lots of attractive shale. There's lots of places in the world that have good shale conditions. You guys are the only ones who managed to do that at scale. And something else that changed. So since I first was reporting in Argentina in 2006, something else that changed is the tech sector. So tech is now the third biggest Argentine export. That's something we weren't writing about in 2010. We didn't realize that was going to happen. And that's another positive evolution. So right, let's go on to investment opportunities. So very quickly, the first one will be finance. This wasn't the main focus of our report, but it's just so obvious we just have to mention it. So in Argentina, credit, like the total amount of credit in the economy is just 9% of GDP. And I'm not going to compare it to the UK or other developed economies. We'll just compare that to the region. In Chile, it's 90%. In Colombia and Peru and Brazil, it's 60%. In Argentina, it's 9%. And as Fabian Con said to me, he said, look, we don't really have a banking sector. It's transactions. What we do is transactions, but we're not performing the usual roles of banks when it comes to long-term investments, long-term credits. If that changes, and well, not if, when, because that's if you look across the world, the amount of credit as a component in each economy, it always goes up. That will change in Argentina. When credit in the Argentine economy rises to regional levels, let's say when it gets to 60%, A, that's going to be extremely good for the banking sector. B, that's going to be good for the wider economy, and I guess house prices as well. So that was one thing we wanted to highlight to our readers. Okay, the most interesting section that we wanted to talk about is energy. So as I say, what's happened with Vaca Muerta is incredible. Very few countries around the world have managed that. And what's especially impressive about that is that Vaca Muerta has grown despite a distorted economy. Just, when I was there in 2010, I remember that when Kirchner was in power, there's a special local price for the barrel of oil. You've got all sorts of restrictions on the equipment that you can import, etc. But the fact is, Vaca Muerta received $5 billion of investment last year. It needs a lot more than that. So I think recently, let me get my figures here. So yeah, last year, it received $5 billion investment, which is the same figure that it received in 2013. So Vaca Muerta is attracting lots of investment, but really those figures are going to go up a lot. So if you add up all of the pledges of all of the international companies in Vaca Muerta, so if you look at what Equinor is saying, and if you look at what Petronas is saying, if you look at what Shell and ExxonMobil are saying, if you add up all of their different commitments, ultimately, these are business commitments, not politicians, so hopefully we can believe them. You're looking at 200 billion of investment that these companies have pledged officially to their investors that they're going to make in Vaca Muerta. So the amount of investment in Vaca Muerta is going to increase exponentially. The other thing that we really like about Vaca Muerta, and when I say we, I'm talking about my readers and investors, is that in any country, you're always conscious of political risk. In Argentina, you're especially conscious of political risk. The great thing about Vaca Muerta and about energy in Argentina is that it's actually very safe from a political situation, because we've seen governments of both sides support Vaca Muerta. They might disagree about how they want to do it. They might have slightly different styles of how they want to do it, but no serious politician in Argentina is going to derail the development of Vaca Muerta, because everybody realizes that they need that money. So from an international investment point of view, that it's actually one of the safest sectors in Argentina. And I went to Neuquén, and you can really notice and feel the difference. This isn't very scientific, but when you go to Neuquén, you see that buildings are being constructed. I was last in Neuquén in 2010. I went back a few months ago, and the change is very dramatic. I spoke to a very, very interesting gentleman, Jorge Sapag, and I spoke to him the day after the provincial elections when we had seen all of those changes. And getting the insight of Jorge Sapag, who is someone who oversaw the development of Vaca Muerta. And again, he explained to me how in Neuquén, you don't have the same political risk that you might get in other parts of Argentina. So yeah, that was a very positive story for our readers. Something that I think is going to help Argentina a lot in the future is the oil and gas production from Vaca Muerta is actually clean. And when I say clean, what we're talking about is in terms of the environment and carbon dioxide. So there's this measure where they measure how many kilograms of CO2 is emitted every time that you produce 1 barrel of oil or gas equivalent. So if you look at that metric, and this is coming from, again, none of this is coming from me. We get that information from different experts. So this is coming from McKinsey. So according to McKinsey, oil and gas produced in the UK emits an average of 24 kilograms of CO2 for every barrel of oil produced. In Mexico, it's far higher. It's 44 kilograms of CO2. And in Argentina, it's 15.8. So in Argentina, it's a lot lower. And at the moment, that probably isn't so relevant. In the coming years, because with Vaca Muerta, we're talking about something that's a multi-decade project. In coming years, that will become more and more important. Investors, consumers, regulators will start saying, how dirty is this oil? And they will start favoring cleaner oil and gas jurisdictions. And Argentina, I'm pleased to say, is a relatively cleaner oil and gas jurisdiction. So basically Argentina is incredibly rich when it comes to energy. You've got renewable energy. In a sense, you guys haven't even been trying with renewable energy. I think when McKeigue came to power, solar and wind was responsible for 1% of Argentine electricity production. That's gone up to roughly 7 or 8%. And clearly, you've got the potential to do much, much more. Renewable energy projects are obviously governed by the regulatory environment. So that will be very much an area for the new government, and whether those investments happen or not will depend on the new government. However, that's the general electricity market. But independently of what the new government decides to do, if it has renewable auctions or not, independently of that, there are 2 areas that we highlighted to our investors. In the south, you have this abundance of wind energy. Now, the wind energy that could be produced in Patagonia it was so incredibly efficient that regardless of what the governments decide, that's going to get produced. That will get produced. Now, it's a long way from any demand. It doesn't really make sense to try and connect it to the transmission system and send it to Buenos Aires. What will probably happen with that renewable energy, and I'm sure you guys have all heard about this project, is that it will be used to make green hydrogen. And there are very few places in the world. Chile is one example of this, where you've got the solar in the Atacama Desert. There are very few places in the world where you have the right combination of an abundance of cheap renewable energy, where it's far from consumer and industrial markets. So you have to find an application for that energy quite near to the site, where you're near to a coast so that you can export the product to global markets. And Patagonia is one of those places. So I went to Patagonia, I went to Bariloche, and I interviewed the outgoing governess, Arabella Carreras, and she taught me through the project. And we also spoke to Fortescue Mining, and there you have all the ingredients for a globally competitive green hydrogen production. Green hydrogen, again, is a premium product because it's cleaner. So it's not blue hydrogen, it's not brown hydrogen. This is going to be a premium product, and it's going to be exported globally. And I guess that's the key for Argentina, is that producing more energy is great because it brings down your local costs and it makes you a more competitive manufacturer, and it makes it easier for the government to get rid of the subsidies, which it will have to do to solve the fiscal deficit. But really, the real riches in this for you are selling this to global markets. Now, there are some existing pipelines that with a few fixes can help you pipe gas and oil to Chile, that can help you pipe gas to Bolivia, that can help you pipe gas to southern Brazil. But the real money is in the LNG plants or the green hydrogen plants that let you send these tankers to Asia and to Europe And when we in Europe are desperate for energy, that's when you get the big bucks. And I'm not an expert. I speak to people in the private sector, and I said, look, the biggest private sector energy project in Argentina in recent history is the 1.2 billion Oldelval pipeline project. And that's one of the biggest projects in recent history. 1.2 billion is not a big project, not for a country of Argentina's wealth or size. It's a relatively small project. And I asked these different industry insiders, is it really feasible that the LNG plant that Petronas and YPF are talking about, which I think off the top of my head is worth 12 billion, that the green hydrogen project that Fortescue is talking about, which is worth 8 or 9 billion, is a country that can barely build a $1 billion pipeline, is it really going to be able to build these export plants? And everyone I spoke to said yes. They said the economics just stacks up in favor. It's going to happen. Obviously, the new government has to create the right regulatory and fiscal environment for that money to enter the country. But yes, the economics, this is what I want to stress, the economics in favor of developing, exporting gas from Vaca Muerta, developing, exporting green hydrogen from Patagonia. Those economics are so strong that this is something that will happen sooner or later. And just finally on that point, obviously in the north, you've got this incredible solar energy. And lots of the mining companies that I spoke to said, we're going to use that solar energy. So getting solar energy from the northern provinces in Argentina and bringing it to Buenos Aires may not be that easy. It might be difficult with the transmission line is like a bottleneck. But if you can send that solar power directly to the mines, that's a win-win. So that's energy. So energy, and something I want to highlight here, I'm going to keep on repeating this point. I'm looking at this at the perspective of UK investors. The UK investors are massive in energy. Like there's some areas where the UK is not relevant anymore. Ambassador Sersale mentioned the fact about the old trading relationship between the UK and Argentina. You know, before the Second World War, we were your largest trading partner. And, you know, sadly, some of the things are not going to come back. The UK is never going to be the #1 trading partner for Argentina. We don't have a big enough internal market. Sadly, we're not going to come and open up factories to build stuff in Argentina. There might be some exceptions, but we're not a manufacturing powerhouse anymore, I'm afraid to say. But in some areas, the UK is still globally relevant. And one of those areas is definitely energy. And part of my talk is that I'm highlighting not just the best investment opportunities, but the ones that have a natural fit with the UK. UK firms, I think one of the largest private sector investment projects in all of Latin America was an energy project in Brazil, and that was carried out by British firms. You've got LG, and you've got Shell, and you've got BP. So the UK is definitely globally relevant when it comes to energy projects. Right, Juan, please give me a signal when I've spoken too much and you want me to end. But until you do that, I'm going to keep speaking.
We are fine actually. We are at 7 o'clock. We want to have time for some questions, maybe 15 minutes. But please go on because it's quite interesting all the tips and ideas that you are sharing with us.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you find it interesting. I try and talk about this with my wife, and she never finds it interesting. So at last, I found my audience. All right, the next one I want to talk about is agribusiness. And look, this isn't rocket science, is it? I mean, Argentina, agribusiness, a child could work that out. But there's a couple of points I want to make. Firstly, agribusiness is obviously the best developed of Argentina's natural resources. As an outsider, when you come to Argentina, and I had this fascinating journey where the governor of, where was it, Catamarca, Raúl Jalil, he took me on his plane and we flew out to Catamarca. And as we were on the plane, I was looking out and you can just see how vast Argentina is. You fly over the Pampas, you can see how much natural resources there are in Argentina. So for an outsider, it's sometimes incredible when you look at a country like Argentina, which is almost the size of India, but whereas the Indians have to share their country with like 1.4 billion more people or 1.5 billion people, Argentina has this vast expense and there's only 4 to 5 million of you. So the natural wealth of Argentina is something that for an outsider always hits us. Agribusiness is the best developed of your natural resources. Clearly, Argentina has done a very, very good job of developing the Pampas and not just a good job of growing stuff. Argentina's done a great job of developing ag tech. So one of the companies we met was Bioceres. And Bioceres is a truly revolutionary company. It's involved in genetically modified solutions. It's listed on the NASDAQ, I believe. And Argentina pioneered the no-till movement, which is like a biodiversity-friendly way of mass agriculture. So Argentina's done a great job, not just of growing and selling products, but also developing a whole ecosystem around it. However, despite the amazing job that Argentina has done, the potential for my readers is huge. So there is a plan to double Argentine food exports in 10 years. And I think at the moment, Argentina, a country of 400 million, produces enough food for 400 million people. I'd have to double check that statistic, but that's something that someone told us. Argentina has a potential to double that. Like Argentina, despite what it's done so far, there's much more it can do. So where are those opportunities? So one opportunity is that, as the drought showed us, temperatures and rainfall patterns are changing across the world. The Argentina needs to combat that by developing and using drought-resistant seeds. So, and again, I'm just repeating what people tell us. So, one of the chaps we interviewed was a gentleman called Gustavo Irigoras from the Chamber of Cereals and Oilseeds. And he said to us, what's basically going to happen is that we have to start using the seeds that they use in more tropical conditions. Maybe we're using seeds that they use in Brazil or seeds that they use in Paraguay. But he said, and indeed, that's already happening. So Bioceres developed a wheat drought-resistant seed that during this current drought, it helped increase yields by 43% compared to a normal seed. So this is already happening, but this is what will happen. That will be the tendency. So in the traditional agricultural zone, you've got to invest in new seeds and new technologies to keep that production going. But more interesting is that in the south, new areas will open up. So Patagonia will become a new breadbasket. As climate change changes rainfall and temperature patterns, areas that Argentina ignored, areas that in the 1850s or 1900s Argentina didn't have to worry about, will now become vital for feeding the world. So the development of a new agricultural frontier in the south will be a big trend. Water use more generally. So if you look at wine production in Mendoza, 50% of the water that the water company in Mendoza pumps, 50% of that is lost before it ever gets used. So the water wastage in Mendoza is horrible. That's something that cannot remain like that. I think there's already Israeli companies working trying to improve the use of water. So Argentina has this incredible ability to double food production, but there will have to be investment in everything from water management to seeds. And again, this is why the UK is relevant, because if Argentina is just producing lots of wheat or lots of soy, there's not much the UK can do there apart from import some soybean. But if Argentina is innovating, using technology, is creating a bioeconomy, when Argentina is doing that sort of stuff, and that's what Argentina will be doing increasingly over the next decade, there are huge opportunities for collaboration with UK, to do with research and development, to do with ag tech companies. So the stage of development that Argentina's agriculture sector is entering means that it's more likely to partner with UK, and there's going to be more natural areas of collaboration. So just to finish this up, so one small example of that. Gustavo Irigoras was telling me about deforestation-free soy. The UK is bringing a new rule that any soy-derived products must have a stamp saying that they're deforestation-free, and that's something that Argentina is now developing and working on. So those types of pioneering products will lead to more collaboration between the UK and Argentina. Right, the next area I want to talk about is mining. It is absolutely amazing. It's shocking. It's incredible how much Argentina has basically ignored mining. You guys share the Andes with Chile, the world's #1 copper producer. And I think at the moment, since Alumbrera closed, I think you're not even producing commercial quantities of copper. Absolutely incredible. I spoke to mining companies. You know why that happened. We all know why that happened. Argentina had a different priority. People explained to me that the 1992 law of mining is actually a very good law and actually paved the way for some mining development. But for various reasons, there were low commodity prices in the 1990s. There was a crisis in Argentina in the 2000s. That sector has not been developed. it might be a blessing in disguise, because you're now the big hope that the world has for the energy transition. The energy transition cannot happen without copper, without lithium. The world is going to be in a shortfall of copper and lithium in the coming years. And Argentina, along with Ecuador, is one of the last great untapped frontiers when it comes to copper. So I spoke to First Quantum. First Quantum Minerals are developing the Taca Taca project. First Quantum Minerals are headquartered in the UK. They're listed in they're listed, I think, in the Canadian stock market, but they are headquartered in the UK. And what First Quantum Minerals explained to me, so they're looking at developing the Taca Taca project, which is a $3.6 billion project. But what they explained to me is the following thing. There are 5 projects, copper projects in Argentina, that are ready to be developed. These are deposits that have been identified. These are deposits where the companies want to do it. If those projects get built like they should be built, Argentina will become, by 2030, a top 10 global copper producer. From nowhere, you'll already be in the top 10, and that's just with 5 mines. So this is something that is an incredible opportunity for my investors, for my readers, but it's also something that's globally significant. And it's an example of how Argentina can be relevant on the global stage, because it's going to play a key role in the energy transition. But again, Argentina, country of contrast, nothing is ever straightforward. We have this strange situation. Right now, none of those copper projects are happening. Why are they not happening? Ambassador Sersale talked on this. He talked about the difficulty of getting capital into the country. Those copper projects cannot happen at the moment because they require investments of billions of dollars. And when the mining companies try and bring the money in to make those investments, they take a hit straight away on the exchange rate. So I think they're losing straight away about 50%. And the trouble is, the money that they borrow that money to build the capital-intensive mine in Argentina on the promise that they'll then get the money back out of the mine production and pay the investors back. Obviously, you can't get dollars out of Argentina. It's very difficult to get dollars out of Argentina at the moment. And the other factor is machinery. These mines are incredibly, I mean, they're not really mines, they're huge industrial complexes. Sometimes they come with their own railways, with their own ports, with their own processing. They need to import lots of complicated, very expensive equipment. Importing equipment right now in Argentina is very difficult because you have to ask permission from the central bank, you have to wait, and you may or you may not get it. So quite frankly, right now, as we are having this talk, the conditions do not exist in Argentina for those mines to be built. The new government, however it does it, needs to find a way for those mines to be built, because each mine is worth, we're talking about $3 or $4 billion. So you're going to get an immediate inflow of almost $20 billion, and then massive export earnings thereafter. So that will be a space to watch. You know, when people ask me, how do we know if Argentina is getting better? When those mines are being built, we know that Argentina is on the path to recovery. But just a quick note, because something that I found amazing. So Argentina always surprises you, right? So something I found amazing is that despite the problems in the copper industry, Argentina's lithium industry is booming. So this is something I never thought I'd hear myself say. The business environment and investment conditions in Argentina for lithium mining are better than in Chile, much better. And that's reflected in the investment. You've got companies from the US, from China, from Korea, from Europe, investing hundreds of millions. I think there's one deal that was almost $1 billion. You've got loads of deals happening right now in lithium. The Argentine lithium space is the most promising, most exciting in the world. Like you have better geology than Australia, and you have better regulatory environment and business conditions than anyone else in Latin America when it comes to lithium. You're not requiring people to work with a state lithium producer. So, and the reason why these mines can happen and the copper mines can't is just sizes. The lithium projects are maybe 200 million, 500 million, and the copper projects are 10 times that. So that was definitely a surprising positive note, that Argentina right now is the best destination for lithium investment in the world, despite everything that's happening. That's the case right now. And there's a good chance that by 2030, Argentina could be the largest lithium exporter in the world. So yeah, Argentina never ceases to surprise. I'm almost coming to an end, but before I do, quick note on technology. this was a complete surprise. So as the UK's only Latin America-focused investment magazine, LATAM Investor does not write a lot about technology. And the reason why we don't write about technology is that we follow the money. So in general in Latin America, the money is going on the commodities. That's true for most of the countries, maybe manufacturing in Mexico, and maybe finance and some infrastructure. That's generally what we write about because that's generally where the money is. Tech in Latin America has started to grow phenomenally in the last 5 years, and Argentina is leading that push. So I was shocked to learn that tech is the third biggest export earner for Argentina. I was shocked to learn that Argentina has the most unicorns per capita than any other country in Latin America. And you hear all sorts of reasons about why this is. I mean, people like to say to me, oh, it's because in Argentina we have so many crises that we have to be innovative to adapt to the crises, and that's why we're so good at technology. I think there's more than that, because if crisis was the only thing you needed to have a good tech sector, then Africa would have a great tech sector and lots of unicorns. There's more than that. I think definitely the public education system in Argentina has played a massive role. That investment is paying off. But what is key is that it's not just to do with the unicorn. So someone like Mercado Libre, Globant, obviously they get all the attention. But something I found far more interesting is that companies like JP Morgan, companies like, I think, EY or PwC, they have their shared service centers. ExxonMobil, that's another one. They have their regional or their America's service centers in Argentina. So, you know, they might have a legal center there, they might have a tech center there. And this isn't the old-fashioned idea of a call center. No, this is, they will have their legal department or their tax department or their technology department for the entire Americas happening in Argentina. So if someone in ExxonMobil or ExxonMobil in the US has some type of problem, they get redirected to a colleague in Argentina. So that's incredible. And in effect, what that means is that Argentina, you know, in poorer Latin American countries like Guatemala or Mexico, the workers leave the economy and they go to the US and then they send the remittances back home. In a sense, what Argentina is doing with these shared service centers is that it's exporting its workers without them leaving Buenos Aires. You know, they're earning the buck, but they're doing it while sitting in Argentina. So I found that a fascinating phenomena. And yes, that concludes my talk. And again, as I near to my conclusion, I just want to say, and effectively this is my conclusion, in all of these sectors that we've highlighted, the tendency is going to be for increased investment from the UK. So right now, the UK is not a relevant investor in Argentina. It's not a large investor in Argentina. Believe it or not, it's possible that within a decade, the UK could be one of the biggest, if not the largest investor in Argentina. That sounds crazy, but if there's some examples to back that up. In Peru, in 2022, the UK was, I think, the second largest investor in Peru. Why? Because Peru is building big copper mines. And when you get to a certain stage in your mining development, when you're at the exploration stage, you have lots of Australian and Canadian firms. When you get to the big mega projects, they're British firms. And that's because, like First Quantum, they're based in London because they want to be close to the global money markets. And if you need to develop a $4 billion project, you need to be close to the global money markets. So that's mining. The same thing in energy. And again, we've got examples of this in other Latin American countries. The largest private sector energy project in Brazil was carried out by Shell and LG, so British companies. The same thing that we talked about in agriculture, not to the same extent, but when you're looking to do more climate conscious ag tech pioneering agriculture, there's going to be more R&D collaboration with the UK. The same thing, obviously, with tech. The UK is one of the innovation centers, one of the global innovation centers. We've already have examples of that. I think Globant has an office in the UK. So the point I want to highlight here is that it just so happens that the major sectors that are going to boom in Latin America are also the major sectors where you see more of a complementary nature with the UK. And you know, I'm going to make a prediction that in 10 years' time, the UK will be a top 3 investor in Argentina. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my speech. Thank you for my patience.
Thank you, James, for that positive ending, that positive note after that grim panorama that you gave us about the economic condition in Argentina. We are running out of time, but we do not want to abuse. Maybe we have 10 minutes to make two questions. The first one is related to if you know something about the combination between startups in the United Kingdom in agribusiness. If you know something, you have any idea on that? Ingrid Drago, which worked at the Rosario Bolsa de Comercio, I wanted to know if you have some ideas on that regard.
Thank you, Juan. So what's the exact question? The links between UK tech firms and startups in Argentina?
Yeah, exactly. If you know something like that, is there an opportunity there?
Yes, so there's some examples. So for example, there's a small Argentine startup called Prisma, and we interviewed them for our report. And Prisma is it helps shops understand their inventory and sell stuff in a more efficient way. And Prisma has opened up like a sales development office in London. You have different venture capitalists and investors in London who focus on tech in Latin America. So Outlier Ventures. If the gentleman who asked the question wants to raise money from the UK for a startup, he should contact Outlier Ventures. I know that they've invested in different tech startups in Latin America. Let's be honest, every single Argentine tech startup is going to list in the US. That's the natural place for Argentine startups to go. That's where they go in terms of stock market listing. However, lots of them, as I've mentioned, will have technology partnerships with the UK. So that's why Globant has got an office there. So, I mean, there you've got three different examples, right? You've got Globant, which probably has some of its technical team in the UK. You've got Prisma, which is a much smaller company, which is looking for customers in the UK. And then you've got Outlier Ventures, which is a UK-based investor, venture capitalist, which is willing to invest in Argentine firms.
That's great. Let me ask you two short questions. The first one is about your idea of the things are going to change. Is not if they are going to change. The real question is when. Well, my question to you is when do you think the things in Argentina are going to change from all the information that you have? In what point between 2023 and 2030 they are going to change? What do you think about it?
This will be very short, Juan. I've got absolutely no idea. Nobody does, neither does anybody else. Yeah, no, absolutely no idea. But I think the only certainty you can say is that I would echo Daniel Marx's views that things have to change because they're not sustainable. And you Argentines will probably not agree with me on this because you've got a different perspective because it's your country. But from an outside investor point of view, we feel it doesn't matter who wins the election. I know that sounds crazy, but it doesn't matter who wins the election because what's been going on so far cannot carry on. You know, if you look at Sergio Massa and he's finding ways to keep stuff going and he goes off, I don't know, to Qatar and he gets $500 million and he goes to the IMF and he gets a bit more money, that just can't work anymore. That's reached the end of the road. So there's going to have to be a change. So from that sense, from an international investor point of view, the change has got to come because the current situation is unsustainable.
And the last one is more a personal one. How difficult is to you to create a case for an investor to invest in Argentina? It is easy. How you prepare a case?
Yes, so it really depends on the sector. So, for example, with copper right now, with those big copper mines, most of them didn't even want to speak to me because they're so angry with the current situation. So with something like that, it's impossible. Like if you're asking someone to commit billions of dollars to Argentina and they're going to take a 50% hit straight away because of the exchange rates, I would say that investment case is very, very difficult. But then if it's something like lithium, the case makes itself because Argentina is the best destination for lithium in the world. So yeah, I'm sorry to not give you such a concise answer, but it really depends on the investment sector. In some areas, Argentina is attractive and competitive right now, and it's an easy case. In other areas, you're asking investors to wait for a couple of years to see if stuff will change.
No, that's good. Well, we are ending our session for today's sessions. I would like to give the floor to Alejandro Campos, if you want to close our session for today.
Yes, of course, and really, James, I just wanted to point out that if you were surprised on the enormous surface of Argentina, maybe you have missed our ocean. If you take into account the ocean, maybe you have a double of the surface that we can develop in terms of resources, energy, fishing. Really, the opportunities are incredible, and the one of the biggest problems we have is that sometimes the window we have to get the advantage on the opportunities are not so wide, no? And in lithium, or even in Vaca Muerta, it's with the energy transition, you don't have a very long term to develop those sectors. So maybe my point is that you have to tell your investors that they must be fast, they must be quick enough to capture all those opportunities. But well, in any case, really listening to you is just an inflow of optimism and to get in good mood on how to face all our current problems and all the political situation and the elections and all that. But listening to someone objective like you is very nice to hear. So thank you very much for your speech. It was really interesting, and well, and also Carlos always so smart in his insight on his experience in UK. It's always nice to listen. So and Juan, always a good good topics to develop, and thank you so much to Sema as well.
Antes de cerrar, quiero agradecerles a todos los que estuvieron escuchando hasta este momento y quiero recomendar justamente un artículo que salió recientemente en la revista LATAM Investor, que es sobre el presente y el futuro de las inversiones en la República Argentina. Recomiendo a todos que entren en la página web y que lo vean, realmente es muy útil la revista para todos aquellos que están tratando de entender cómo nos ven y qué oportunidades hay de afuera hacia adentro y cómo estamos siendo vistos y analizados por todos en el mundo. Thank you, James, once again. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your remarks. Carlos, siempre un placer escucharte y compartir contigo estas tardes de la Cátedra del Reino Unido. Buenas tardes a todos y muchas gracias. James, vamos a estar en contacto y desde el SEMA sabé que tenés un socio para expandir tus ideas cuando lo quieras, lo desees propiamente dicho.
Gracias, Juan. Gracias, embajador, y gracias, Alejandro.
Adiós.
Chao, chao.